Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales that we're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin. Time didn't slow down, it stopped entirely. One moment, I was yelling, my voice cracking with anger, and the next, I was airborne, flung backward by a force I hadn't anticipated. Pain erupted through my body as I struck the staircase. Wood bit into my back, and my skull thudded against the edge of a step. For a second, everything went black. Then sound rushed in, a chaotic symphony of shouts, hurried footsteps, and a voice I recognized as hers. "Jeff, what did you do? What did he do?" "He tried to kill me. I wanted to move, to scream, but pain chained me down." Through hazy vision, I saw Abigail standing there, her robe slipping off one shoulder, revealing too much of what I wished I'd never seen. And behind her, Jeff, bigger, smugger, more monstrous than I'd ever imagined. My body felt like shattered glass. The pain roared through every nerve as I lay crumpled at the foot of the stairs, staring up at the figures above me. Abigail, my wife, my partner of 8 years, looked frantic. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear her words through the ringing in my ears. Jeff stood over her, his towering frame radiating smugness. He wasn't yelling anymore. He didn't need to. The damage had been done. His words earlier, "That'll teach you, loser," still echoed in my mind like a ghost. I blinked slowly, trying to keep consciousness. Through the haze, I saw Abigail reach for him. Not to push him away, not to slap him for what he'd done, but to hold him back. To protect him. She was defending the man who had just tried to kill me. The betrayal burned hotter than the pain in my ribs. My mind scrambled to piece together what I had seen and heard just moments earlier. The laughter, the moans, the creak of the couch, my couch. I had come home early to surprise her, only to find her tangled with Jeff, her boss. And when I confronted them, all hell broke loose. 3 weeks ago, I couldn't have imagined my life unraveling like this. It had been an ordinary evening, quiet, uneventful. Abigail was in the shower, singing off-key like always. I smiled to myself, grateful for the little quirks that made her who she was. My phone buzzed with a work email, and I almost didn't notice her phone lighting up on the counter. It wasn't the first time I'd seen Jeff's name pop up. I ignored it at first, giving her the benefit of the doubt. But something felt wrong. This time, curiosity got the better of me. The message wasn't ambiguous. "Hey, sweetheart, same time tomorrow? I can't stop thinking about you." The words hit me like a gut punch. I stared at the screen, willing it to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. But the proof was right there. I scrolled further, my stomach churning as I read thread after thread of flirtatious texts, explicit promises, and casual disdain for the man she called her husband me. When I woke up, the fluorescent lights above me were blinding. My head throbbed, my ribs ached, and every breath felt like a stab to the lungs. A voice, calm but clinical, spoke nearby. "He's lucky. No spinal damage, but the bruising on his back is extensive. Left arm, multiple fractures. Concussion, but no internal bleeding." I groaned softly, and the voices shifted closer. "He's awake," one said. The memories hit me like a sledgehammer. The fight, the fall, Abigail crying on the landing as Jeff smirked and left me for dead. I turned my head, wincing at the pain. Where am I?" My voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "You're in the hospital," the nurse said gently. "You've been here for a day. The police are waiting to speak with you." The police. Of course. The weight of what had happened settled over me like a suffocating blanket. Jeff had tried to kill me. Abigail had stood by and let it happen. But I wasn't dead, and I wasn't done. Lying in that hospital bed, I made a decision. I would not let Jeff and Abigail walk away unscathed. They thought they had destroyed me. They thought I would fade into the background, another casualty of their selfishness. They were wrong. I started planning. Every detail. Every angle. My revenge wouldn't just be about justice. It would be about dismantling their lives piece by piece, just as they had tried to dismantle mine. I had the recordings. I had the evidence. But I needed more. I needed allies. And I needed to be patient. Revenge, I realized, is a dish best served with precision. Still confined to the hospital, I spent hours piecing together a strategy. It wasn't enough to expose Jeff and Abigail. That would be too easy. I wanted them to feel the weight of their actions, professionally, financially, and emotionally. When the police arrived to take my statement, I recounted the events in vivid detail. Jeff threw me down the stairs, I said firmly. He was enraged, yelling insults, and my wife helped him. She grabbed my arm to stop me from defending myself. It wasn't entirely true, but I needed to tip the scales. I described the scratches on my arm, the threats Jeff made, and how Abigail did nothing to stop him. My voice wavered, not from weakness, but from the searing anger bubbling beneath the surface. The officers nodded, taking notes, their faces grim. "We'll need to corroborate your story," one said. "Do you have any proof of what happened before the attack?" I hesitated for effect. "Yes," I finally said. "I have recordings, text messages, enough to show exactly what's been going on." After the police left, I made my first call to Sharon, Jeff's wife. Her voice was tight with suspicion when she answered. "What do you want, George?" "I think you deserve to know what your husband has been doing," I said evenly. "And I think you'll want to help me make him pay for it." There was a long silence, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "Go on." I laid it all out. The affair, the attack, the lies. I didn't hold back. By the time I finished, Sharon was seething. "That son of a bitch," she hissed. "I've suspected something for months, but I never thought he'd sink this low. Can you meet me?" I asked. "I have evidence, but I need your help to make it count." We agreed to meet later that week. I wasn't just enlisting her for her fury. I needed her access to Jeff's financial records, his network, and his weaknesses. Meanwhile, Abigail was unraveling. She showed up at the hospital the next day, her face pale and drawn. "George," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You have to believe me." I stared at her, my expression cold. "You stood there while he tried to kill me," I said. "And now you want me to believe you're innocent?" Her lip quivered, but she pressed on. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. "Jeff, he said we should stick to a story, that it was an accident." I was scared, George. Scared for him, I shot back. "Not for me." She broke down, sobbing. "Please, I'll do anything to make this right. Counseling, therapy, I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't throw away everything we've built." The irony was almost laughable. "You threw it away the moment you let him into our bed," I said. "And the moment you stood by while he nearly killed me. Get out. Abigail, I don't want to see you again." As she left, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, I felt a twinge of something I couldn't name. Was it pity? Regret? It didn't matter. I couldn't let it distract me from what needed to be done. Meeting Sharon was a turning point. We sat in a quiet coffee shop, the tension between us palpable. She looked tired but resolute, a folder of documents clutched in her hands. "This," she said, sliding the folder across the table, "is everything you'll need to bury him. Bank statements, account numbers, evidence of his offshore accounts. He's been siphoning money for years." I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding. This was gold. "And Abigail?" I asked. "She's just as guilty," Sharon said, her voice cold. "But I'm not after her. Jeff's the one I want to destroy." I nodded, knowing our goals aligned perfectly. "Then let's make sure he doesn't get back up." Using Sharon's information, I worked with the police and a private investigator to uncover Jeff's financial fraud. At the same time, I leaked select pieces of evidence to Jeff's colleagues, ensuring his reputation was in shambles before the charges even hit. Jeff was arrested on charges of assault and attempted murder, but his legal troubles didn't end there. The financial evidence led to embezzlement charges, forcing him to sell his real estate franchise to cover mounting legal fees. Abigail, meanwhile, was charged as an accomplice after the fact. Her family was horrified, her friends distanced themselves, and her once bright career crumbled. The revenge wasn't just about punishing them, it was about reclaiming my own life. With Jeff behind bars and Abigail humiliated, I found myself standing taller, feeling stronger. But the story wasn't over. Jeff wouldn't stay in prison forever, and Abigail's attempts to reconcile wouldn't stop. I would be ready. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, onlookers, and a few familiar faces filled the gallery, their whispers swirling like static in the background. The case had drawn attention, not just for the sordid affair, but for the assault charges and financial scandal that followed. I sat quietly, my arms still in a cast, the pain in my back a constant reminder of what had happened. Jeff was seated at the defense table, his expression a mix of arrogance and barely concealed panic. The prosecutor didn't waste time. "Mr. Coleman," he said, addressing the jury, "is a man who thought he could have it all. He betrayed his family, his employees, and his colleagues. And when his actions were exposed, he resorted to violence. Today, we'll prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Mr. Coleman is guilty of assault with intent to kill and financial fraud." The defense countered with predictable claims. I had attacked first. Jeff had acted in self-defense. The financial evidence was circumstantial. It would have been laughable if the stakes weren't so high. When I took the stand, I spoke with calm precision. "I came home early that day to surprise my wife," I began. "What I found was her and Mr. Coleman in an intimate situation. When I confronted them, Mr. Coleman became violent. He grabbed me, dragged me to the stairs, and threw me down." The prosecutor played the audio recordings I had submitted, including the incriminating phone call between Abigail and Jeff after the incident. The jury's reaction was palpable, a collective gasp at the cold, callous way they had discussed my injury. When Jeff took the stand, his temper got the best of him. "I didn't mean to hurt him," he snapped. "But if he'd stayed out of my way—" The prosecutor pounced. "Stayed out of your way? You mean stayed out of his own home, where you were trespassing with his wife?" Jeff stammered, his lawyer frantically trying to object. But the damage was done. When Abigail was called to testify, the room grew tense. She looked fragile, her once confident demeanor replaced by a nervous energy. "Mrs. Peterson," the prosecutor began, "you've admitted to lying to the police about the events of that day. Why should the jury believe anything you say now?" Tears welled in her eyes as she replied, "Because I'm telling the truth now. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Jeff said we needed to stick to a story, and I listened to him. I was wrong." Her testimony, though damaging to Jeff, didn't absolve her. She admitted to helping him fabricate the story, to grabbing my arm during the struggle, and to failing to call for help after I fell. The prosecutor's closing argument was scathing. Jeff Coleman is a man who believed he was untouchable. Abigail Peterson is a woman who chose loyalty to her lover over doing the right thing. Both of them must face the consequences of their actions. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Jeff was found guilty on multiple counts: assault with intent to kill, financial fraud, and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, with no chance of parole for the first 7. Abigail faced a lesser sentence: 1 year for her role as an accomplice and for perjury. However, the judge reduced it to 3 months in jail, citing her cooperation during the trial. Abigail showed up at my fishing cabin the day she was released from jail. Her appearance shocked me. She looked thin, her hair dull and lifeless, her eyes hollow. "I know you don't want to see me," she began, her voice trembling. "But I needed to apologize. For everything." I let her speak, watching her crumble as she poured out her regrets. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said finally, tears streaming down her face. I needed you to know that I never stopped loving you. Even when I was at my worst." I didn't respond immediately. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her that it would be okay. But another part, the part that remembered the betrayal, the lies, and the pain, stayed silent. "Abigail," I said finally, "I've moved on. You need to do the same." She nodded, broken but accepting. With Jeff and Abigail out of my life, I focused on rebuilding. My friendship with Sharon grew stronger, our shared experience bonding us in a way few could understand. She finalized her divorce from Jeff and threw herself into her work, finding satisfaction in watching his empire crumble. For me, moving forward meant more than just healing. It meant rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. I started dating again, cautiously at first. Stella, the nurse who had helped me that fateful night, became a bright spot in my life. She was everything Abigail hadn't been: honest, supportive, and unwaveringly loyal. A year after we began dating, we married in a small ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. Despite the happiness I had found, I knew Jeff wouldn't stay in prison forever. The thought of his eventual release lingered in the back of my mind, like a storm cloud on the horizon. A few months after the trial, I received an anonymous letter. "You think you've won, George, but this isn't over." I folded the letter carefully, locking it away in a drawer. Whatever Jeff had planned, I would be ready. Months turned into years. Life began to feel normal again, even happy. My relationship with Stella flourished. She brought light into the darkest corners of my life, and her steady presence reminded me that not everything in this world was deceit and betrayal. But the letter, the threat, remained in the back of my mind. I had locked it away, but its weight lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that Jeff was planning something from behind bars. Jeff was not the kind of man to endure humiliation quietly. Prison life had stripped him of his power, reducing him to just another inmate. He tried to assert dominance, but his arrogance painted a target on his back. Rumors trickled out about his time inside. How he'd been attacked in the showers, how he'd spent weeks in solitary after threatening a guard, how his once imposing frame had withered under the weight of confinement. But even in prison, Jeff remained dangerous. He had connections, men willing to do his bidding for the right price. One day, I received a call from Sharon. "You need to be careful," she warned. "Jeff's been asking questions about you. He's still bitter, George, and he's got nothing left to lose." I thanked her, but her words only confirmed what I already knew. Jeff wasn't done with me. While Jeff stewed in his cell, Abigail tried to rebuild her life. After serving her 3-month sentence, she moved in with her parents. Her mother, Sylvia, had always been a proud woman, and the scandal had shaken her deeply. "You disgraced this family," Sylvia told her. "But you're my daughter, and I'll help you get back on your feet." Abigail threw herself into work, taking a sales job that paid far less than her previous one. She avoided social gatherings, unable to face the whispers and judgment. But her attempts to reach out to me persisted. "George," her messages would begin, "I know you hate me, but I just want to talk." I never replied. There was nothing left to say. 7 years after Jeff's conviction, the day I had both dreaded and anticipated finally came. Jeff was released on parole. I knew the moment he walked free, thanks to Sharon. "He's out," she said over the phone, "and he's already making noise." "What kind of noise?" I asked, my voice calm despite the knot tightening in my chest. "He's been talking about settling old scores," she replied. "You need to be ready, George." I've been ready for years. It didn't take long for Jeff to resurface. I spotted him one afternoon while walking through the town square with Stella. He was leaning against a lamppost, his eyes fixed on me with a smug grin that sent a chill down my spine. "George," he called out, his voice carrying across the square. I stopped, instinctively moving Stella behind me. "What do you want, Jeff?" He sauntered closer, his movements slow and deliberate. The years in prison had aged him, but the venom in his gaze was as sharp as ever. "Just wanted to see how the other half lives," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Looks like you've done well for yourself. And you've lost everything," I replied evenly. His grin faltered, but only for a moment. "You think this is over, George? You think you've won? You don't know me at all." Before I could respond, Stella stepped forward. "Get out of here," she said, her voice firm. "You've done enough damage." Jeff chuckled darkly. "Feisty. I like that." I clenched my fists, but Stella placed a calming hand on my arm. "He's not worth it," she said quietly. Jeff took a step back, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Enjoy your happy little life while you can," he said. "It won't last." That night, I sat with Stella in our living room, going over every possible scenario. I had spent years preparing for this moment, but now that Jeff was free, the threat felt more immediate. "We'll be fine," Stella said, her hand resting on mine. "You've built a life that he can't touch." But I wasn't so sure. Jeff was resourceful, and his hatred for me burned brighter than ever. The next few weeks were tense. I kept a close eye on my surroundings, wary of any signs that Jeff was acting on his threats. I upgraded our home security, alerted the police to his behavior, and made sure Stella knew how to handle herself if he came too close. Jeff's attempts to intimidate me escalated over time. An anonymous letter here, a slashed tire there. But his arrogance was his downfall. He had grown careless, leaving a trail that was easy to trace. One evening, as I reviewed footage from the security cameras, I spotted him lurking near our property. I immediately called the police, providing them with the evidence they needed to revoke his parole. When they arrested him the next day, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. "Looks like your old friend won't be bothering us anymore," Stella said with a smile. Jeff's return to prison marked the end of a chapter that had haunted me for years. With him gone, I could finally focus on the life I had built with Stella, a life rooted in trust, love, and resilience. As I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset, I realized that the past no longer had power over me. I had won, not through vengeance alone, but through the strength to move forward. And that, I knew, was the best revenge of all. With Jeff back in prison, the tension that had hovered over my life for years finally began to dissipate. Stella and I settled into a peaceful rhythm, our lives free from the shadow of his venom. But even as we embraced the quiet, there were remnants of the past that lingered, old wounds that refused to heal completely. One afternoon, months after Jeff's arrest, I received a letter. The handwriting was unmistakably Abigail's. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I even wanted to read what she had to say. But curiosity won out. "Dear George, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this. For years, I've carried the weight of what I did to you, and it's a weight I'll never fully shed. I was selfish, weak, and blind to what I had until I lost it. You didn't deserve any of it. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I've been working to make amends, not just for you, but for myself. I've been volunteering at a shelter, helping people who've lost their way just as I did. It's not enough, but it's something. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, George. I'm sorry I destroyed it. I hope you found happiness, and I hope someday, when you think of me, it won't be with hatred. Abigail." I folded the letter and set it aside, my emotions a tangle of anger, sadness, and a flicker of something I couldn't quite name. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, but for the first time, I believed her regret was genuine. Stella was my anchor through it all. She never pressured me to share more than I was comfortable with, but she always knew when I needed her support. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, she reached for my hand. "You've come so far, George," she said softly. "I'm proud of you." Her words warmed something deep inside me. "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied. She smiled, her eyes sparkling in the moonlight. "We've both been through our own battles, but we came out stronger. Together." A year after Jeff's return to prison, Stella and I welcomed our first child, a baby girl we named Hope. The name felt fitting, a symbol of everything we had endured and the life we were building together. Holding Hope in my arms for the first time, I felt a profound sense of peace. The past no longer felt like a chain dragging me down. Instead, it was a reminder of how far I had come and how much I had to be grateful for. Years passed and life moved on. Abigail stayed out of my life, save for the occasional news passed along by mutual acquaintances. She had moved to another city, remarried, and seemed to be living quietly. But one day, out of the blue, she showed up at my office. I hadn't seen her in years, and the sight of her took me by surprise. She looked different, older, perhaps a bit worn, but there was a calmness in her demeanor that hadn't been there before. "George," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I'm sorry for showing up like this. I wanted to see you, to thank you." "For what?" I asked, my tone guarded. "For teaching me what love really is," she said. "I didn't appreciate it when I had it, but I see it now. I see it in the way you've moved on, in the life you've built with Stella. You deserved better, and I'm glad you found it." I nodded, unsure what to say. "I won't bother you again," she added, turning to leave. "I just needed you to know that." As she walked away, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. The chapter with Abigail had finally come to an end. Jeff never got another chance to interfere in my life. His parole was denied twice, and he eventually faded into obscurity, a man undone by his own arrogance and greed. Sharon thrived, her divorce settlement allowing her to rebuild her life on her own terms. We remained friends, our bond forged in shared pain and resilience. And me? I found joy, peace, and purpose in the life I had built with Stella and Hope. The scars of the past were still there, but they no longer defined me. Revenge had been sweet, but what came after, the healing, the rebuilding, the love, was sweeter still. Years passed, and my life with Stella and Hope grew fuller and more vibrant. Our family expanded when we welcomed a son, James, into the world, and watching my children grow felt like the ultimate victory over the chaos that had once consumed me. But even as I embraced this new chapter, echoes of the past occasionally rippled through our lives. Sharon, always determined and resourceful, became a close friend over the years. She had rebuilt her life with remarkable strength, using her divorce settlement to open a nonprofit organization that supported victims of domestic and financial abuse. One afternoon, while our family shared a picnic by the lake, she leaned over and said, "You know, George, I've been thinking about organizing a conference. It'd bring together people who've survived betrayal and violence, like us, to share their stories and offer support to others." "That's a great idea," I said, genuinely impressed. She smiled. "You've got a story worth sharing too, you know." I laughed softly. "I don't think people want to hear about revenge and court battles." "Oh, but they do," Sharon said, her tone serious. "You turned the worst moments of your life into something better. That's powerful." I considered it. Maybe sharing my story would help others find their own strength. Meanwhile, Abigail's path continued to cross mine, albeit indirectly. Mutual acquaintances mentioned her from time to time. How she had remarried a quiet man who worked in IT. How she volunteered regularly. How she seemed genuinely remorseful for the person she used to be. One day, I received a letter from her husband. "Dear George, you don't know me, but I'm married to Abigail. I wanted to thank you for the grace you showed her after everything that happened. She speaks of you often, with regret and admiration. I know she caused you pain, but I hope you know that she's spent every day since trying to atone for it. Thank you for letting her move on. It's allowed us to build a life together, one she values deeply. Sincerely, David." I stared at the letter for a long time, my emotions swirling. It felt surreal to think of Abigail finding peace and redemption. I didn't reply, but I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was closure. Jeff's name came up again one night when I received an unexpected call from his parole officer. "Mr. Peterson," the man said, "I'm calling to inform you that Jeff Coleman has been granted parole on the condition of strict supervision." I felt a chill run through me. "And you're telling me this because—" "He listed you as someone he might reach out to," the officer explained. "We're obligated to warn you." I hung up, my mind racing. I told Stella immediately, and we reinforced our security measures once again. True to his nature, Jeff didn't waste time trying to reinsert himself into my life. It started with small things, a cryptic voicemail here, a suspicious car parked near our house there. But when he sent an anonymous package containing a photograph of Stella and the kids, I knew he had gone too far. I didn't wait for Jeff to make his next move. Instead, I went straight to the police with the evidence. They were hesitant at first, citing the lack of direct threats, but I made it clear that I wasn't taking any chances. With Sharon's help, I also contacted a lawyer who specialized in restraining orders and victim protection. Within days, I had a legal order in place barring Jeff from coming within 500 feet of me or my family. But Jeff didn't care about legal boundaries. One evening, as I walked to my car after work, I saw him waiting in the shadows of the parking lot. "You've got some nerve," he said, stepping into the light. I didn't flinch. "You've got some stupidity," I replied. "You're violating a restraining order." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think a piece of paper is going to stop me?" I stared him down, my hand resting on my phone. "No, but the police will. They're already on their way." His smirk faltered, and for a moment, I saw the man he truly was: pathetic, desperate, and broken. "This isn't over," he hissed, retreating into the darkness. Minutes later, the The police arrived and took him into custody. His parole was revoked, and he was sent back to prison. With Jeff permanently out of the picture, the shadow he had cast over my life finally lifted. Stella and I focused on raising our children, teaching them the values of honesty, loyalty, and resilience. Sharon's nonprofit flourished, and she became a prominent advocate for victims' rights. As for me, I finally agreed to speak at Sharon's conference. Standing before an audience of strangers, I shared my story, not just of betrayal and revenge, but of rebuilding, healing, and finding love again. And as I looked out at the faces of people searching for their own strength, I realized that my greatest revenge wasn't the downfall of Jeff or Abigail. It was the life I had built in their absence, a life filled with love, purpose, and unshakable hope. The years that followed were marked by peace, a calmness I had fought hard to earn. The shadows of betrayal and violence had long since faded, replaced by the warmth of family and the satisfaction of a life rebuilt. Months after Jeff was sent back to prison, I received news that brought the saga to a definitive close. Jeff had been involved in an altercation with another inmate, one that ended with him severely injured and transferred to a maximum security facility. The news stirred no emotion in me. He had been the architect of his own downfall, and his fate was a testament to the choices he had made. "I guess that's the end of him," Stella said when I told her. I nodded, feeling only relief. It's about time. From that day forward, Jeff Coleman became little more than a memory, a ghost of the past that no longer had any power over my life. Years later, I heard that Abigail had moved to a new city with her husband, David, and started a family of her own. She had become a dedicated volunteer, working tirelessly to help women rebuild their lives after abuse and betrayal. Her journey didn't matter to me in the way it once might have. I didn't hate her anymore, but I also didn't forgive her. What she did with her life was hers to own, just as I owned mine. The home Stella and I built together became a haven of love and growth. Hope and James were thriving. Hope with her boundless curiosity and love of painting, James with his quiet determination and knack for puzzles. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table laughing over one of James' silly stories, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "This is what it's all about," I said, looking at Stella and the kids. She smiled, her hand resting on mine. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" "We have," I said, my voice steady. "And I wouldn't change a thing." Years after the events that had reshaped my life, I stood before an audience at Sharon's conference, ready to share my story. I spoke not just of betrayal, revenge, and justice, but of resilience and the power of rebuilding. My greatest revenge wasn't taking them down, I told the crowd. It was creating a life they could never touch, a life rooted in trust, love, and purpose. That's what I want you to remember. No matter how broken you feel, you have the power to rebuild stronger than ever. The applause was thunderous, but it was the tearful faces in the audience that struck me the most. My story had resonated with them, not because of its darkness, but because of the light that followed. In the end, the past became just that, the past. Jeff Coleman's name faded into obscurity, and Abigail found her own version of redemption far from my life. But for me, life was defined not by what I had lost, but by what I had gained. My love for Stella, my pride and hope in James, my friendships, my work, all of it was a testament to the strength I had found within myself. And as I stood on the porch one quiet evening, watching the sun set over the horizon, I knew with certainty that I had won. Not because I had taken revenge, but because I had built a life worth living. A life that was mine. The end.